Well, hello everybody. Welcome, welcome. We're going to be this is our first Wednesday night of the year, isn't it? There we go. Well, it's good to be back to Wednesdays. Arguably my favorite service. I prefer Wednesdays, I think. Um, Sundays are wonderful too, but I'm a Wednesday kind of guy myself. Um, in which way, we're going to be continuing our teaching series that we've been on, the stories that shaped Jesus. And the motivation behind this is that if we want to understand our New Testament, if we want to understand the theology of the New Testament believers, the writers, and of course understand the mission of Jesus, our Messiah, then we need to understand the scriptures and the stories that he read that shaped his mission, his purpose, and his view of the world. So remember, at that time in the first century, they didn't have the complete canon that we have. They just had what we call the Old Testament, their Bible, and maybe a select other couple of books. And so we want to familiarize ourselves with those stories and the contents so we can more effectively read the New Testament. My desire is for all of us to be equipped with the knowledge and skills that we need to properly read the New Testament. And so with that, today I had intended to cover a lot of ground, but I don't think time will permit. And so today I'll just be covering the Joseph story. I wanted to cover the Joseph story and up unto the first Passover, but that was quite an ambitious task. That would have been roundabouts 25 chapters of the Bible to cover in a session, and that's just not within me to do that. And so we'll just be covering still quite a bit of ground. The Joseph story takes place from Genesis 37 until Genesis 50, and just rereading it today, I sat and read through it, 37 to 50, and I've come to the revelation that Genesis is my favorite book in the Bible, but the Joseph story is the most entertaining story, I think, of the entire the entire Old Testament. If you haven't read it recently, it is so well written. I think what stands out to me about the Joseph story is how different it is written from other stories, in the sense that there's so much detail, and that's weird for the Bible. I feel like there's an odd amount of detail in the Joseph story. It's so much. You ever read the Bible, you have a hard time picturing what's happening because you feel like there's a lot of details missing. That's intentional. The Bible writes that way on purpose. Joseph's story is not like that. You're given everything, and you're like, okay, I'm here. And so it's really wonderfully written. And so if you haven't read it recently, particularly like Genesis 42 to like 46, like the part when he is meeting his brothers for the first time, I'm talking about just gold. That's cinema. I mean, it is so good. But let me read this. I'm going to read Psalm 105. This is the Psalter giving a summary of the Joseph stories. I want you to see how he summarizes the story. And when he summoned famine against the land, I'm reading from the NRSV. She'll have the NESB. But if you want to look up with me what I'm reading, I'm using the NRSV. And so just so you know what translation I'm using. But they should be similar enough. When he summoned famine against the land, and he cut off every supply of bread, he sent a man ahead of them, Joseph, who had been sold as a slave. His feet were hurt with fetters, and his neck was put in a collar of iron, until what he had said came to pass. The word of the Lord kept testing him. The king sent and released him. The ruler of the people set him free, and he made him lord of his house and ruler of all possessions, to instruct his officials at his pleasure, to teach his elders wisdom. Then Israel came to Egypt. Jacob lived as an alien in the land of Ham. So that's the summary of events. And it's summarizing it in poetic fashion. what's cool is we're going to read another summary. This Acts chapter 7. What's cool is this. You can see how this story is told poetically. And now we can see the same story told more, didactically, more like as a teaching. Here's Acts chapter 7. We're going to begin at verse 9. This is Stephen. Stephen is about to be martyred. He's about to be taken. His life's about to be taken. And he's going through the whole of Israel's history. And look how he summarizes the story of Joseph. It's very similar. But notice, if you would have to sit for a long time and compare the two and look at the language and see the kind of moves that the authors make. But this is cool here. The patriarchs, jealous of Joseph. Just notice that. Notice his brothers are called the patriarchs, right? And so that's just worth noting here. The patriarchs, jealous of Joseph, sold him into Egypt, but God was with him and rescued him from all his afflictions and enabled him to win favor and to show wisdom when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who appointed him to be ruler over Egypt and all of his household. Now there came a famine throughout Egypt and Canaan and great suffering, and our ancestors could find no food. But when Jacob heard that there was grain in Egypt, he sent our ancestors there on their first visit. On the second visit, Joseph made himself known to his brothers, and Joseph's family became known to Pharaoh. Then Joseph sent and invited his father, Jacob, and all his relatives to come with him, 75 in all. I think Genesis says 72. And I think Exodus might say 70. So it's 70, 72, 75, roundabouts there. And so Jacob went down to Egypt, and he himself died there as well as our ancestors, and their bodies were brought back to Shechem and laid in the tomb that Abraham had bought for a sum of silver from the sons of Hamor and Shechem. Right. And so this is the overview of the Joseph story. What both of these authors find to be the most important is that Joseph was sold into slavery. That's consistent in both. He suffered a lot of affliction. So that'd be the pit, Potiphar's house, and the prison. He was exalted to a position next to Pharaoh. That's in both. And because of the wisdom that he was given, he was able to be a blessing. And so that's the Joseph story. He was sold into slavery, underwent many trials, got anointed with wisdom. He was exalted. God used that exaltation to provide for his family, for them to be saved. And that's the real big 10,000 feet in the air. That's the story of Joseph. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to tell that story, the Joseph story, and I'm going to hit some things. I can't touch everything. I would love to. But that would take far too much time. So I'm going to try to hit some things and point some things out to you about the Joseph story, just to familiarize myself with the audience. How many of us are familiar with Joseph's story? If you're familiar with the story, you can raise your hand so I can see. So we're all more or less familiar. Okay, so if I go at a quick pace, I don't go through everything, it's okay. You're familiar with the story. Okay, so the Joseph story starts with a 17-year-old boy, and depending on how you read the text, the depiction of Joseph can go either two ways. He's either and I think the narrative actually leans this way. He's a painfully honest and full of integrity young man who's honest to a fault that gets his brother's wrath. I think that goes in line with the narrative. But I also think there's a more pessimistic reading that he's he's a little bit of a narcissist, a little bit arrogant, a little youthful, maybe lacking in discretion. Narcissist is not the word. He's lacking in discretion, he's youthful, and he's a bit of a braggart. I think that's a really negative reading. And I've heard some people say it. I think the worst thing we could fault Joseph for in his early years It's just he lacks discretion. He's 17, right? We've all been 17 or either know 17-year-olds, right? We were dumb and they are dumb. That's just being 17. And you know that to be the case because when you get a vision that says that my family is going to bow down and worship me, there's a way to share that and there's a way not to. And Joseph, honest Joseph to a fault, shares, hey guys, I had this crazy dream, right? And in this dream, I was just exalted above all of you guys. And that made them angry, rightfully so. He knows they're angry. He has a second dream. And what he does with the second dream is, so I had this other dream, right? And so it's deep honesty. I think it's like profound, beyond like super honesty. I think that's part of it. But it's but more than that, I think it's just youthful indiscretion. No, please have a seat anywhere. Please come be comfortable. Come. I think it's just youthful indiscretion. And so I think that's Joseph, right? He's just a young guy, and he's just maybe he was not quite discerning. And so the story goes on. His brothers are all shepherding because they're a family of shepherds, and Joseph is reporting back to his father, brothers are a bit lazy. They're not doing their job the way they should. So he's really honest to a fault. So much so, it causes him problems. And the reason why I think that's the way to read Joseph, instead of reading him as an arrogant young man, I think reading him as honest to a fault is better because it goes with the rest of the text. Because that's what got him in trouble in Potiphar's house, because he was honest to a fault. And I think there's a theme that emerges, but we'll get there. And so he's going out to find his brothers again. He's going out to find them. And as he's traveling out, he finds this man and says, hey, have you seen my brothers? We don't know who this man is. He's just the Hebrew word ish. He's just man. So there's some unidentified man. Some scholars would say that they theorize that it's a manifestation of an angel of some sort. I don't want to read too much in the text. I like a plain reading. It's just probably just some guy who, if you're a guy with 12 kids in that community, everybody knows who you are, right? If you're the guy with 12 kids, everybody knows who you are. And so if your family has gone off to shepherd feed their flocks a little further along, and you say, hey, where's the sons of Jacob? Everybody knows who that is. So he asked this man he said, hey, where's my brothers? They're off in Dothan. And so they go on, he go meet the brothers, and as he's coming, the brothers say, this dreamer comes, this kid. Got him in his dreams. I can't stand this guy in his dreams. You know what we ought to do? Let's kill him. Let's kill this guy. And Reuben, the only sensible one in a bunch, hey guys, maybe not murder. He is our brother. Maybe don't kill Joseph. This is our blood. He's our blood. And so, okay, how about this? We'll just prank him a little bit. You know those YouTube channels with the little prank videos, right? Let's just do a little prank. Let's scare him a little bit. We'll put him in a pit. And so he gets up. They bully him a little bit. They put him in the pit. Okay, and so Joseph, not having a good day. Reuben steps away, and then Judah rises up, right? Judah rises up. And Judah's like, we can't kill him, but we can make money. We can't kill him, but we can make money. Oh, this is interesting. I haven't thought through this, but this is just something that I noticed. He sold his brother for silver, Judah did. Judas, his name is Judah in Hebrew, the same name. So Judah sold Joseph for silver, and Judas sold Jesus for silver. I think I haven't thought through that connection, but I'm sure something there. But it's universally agreed that Joseph is a type of Christ, and so you can see a lot of parallels there. And so maybe think about that for a while, and maybe go for a walk and meditate about the scripture. Maybe something will come to you. And so they agree with this plan, and so there's the Midianites or the Ishmaelites, They're overlapped in the text. It doesn't matter. They come and they say, hey, we'll sell you for silver. We'll sell them for silver. And so they do that. They sell them off. Reuben comes back, expecting the prank to be done, looking for his brother, and he's gone. He's like, hey, guys, where's Joseph? Well, this happened and that happened, and now he's gone. And so they're distraught. Well, not they. Reuben's distraught. He tears his garment, and then they take the garment that he's got from his father, because Joseph received this really special garment. They dipped it in blood, bring it back to the dad, and then show it to their father, and now they use this garment to deceive their father. Highlight that in your mind. The garment was used to deceive the brother. So I want to pause real quick. We had some friends that came in a little bit later. Just so you're not wondering the whole lesson, what point that I'm trying to get to, where our teaching series are the stories that shape Jesus, is nothing profound. We're just going through major stories of the Old Testament, because these are the stories that shape the theology and the identity of Jesus, and so we need to know these stories well. And so my goal is to review these stories, and I'm going to highlight things that are going to help you interpret the Old and New Testament along the way. And so that's it. So I'm literally just telling the story of Joseph today. Okay, there we go. So now, because I don't want you sitting with anticipation. I wonder what point he's going to. No, we're just telling the story, guys. Okay. And so, but I want to point out a theme. So Joseph receives a garment. Reuben tears his garment. They dip that garment in blood. And then when Jacob realizes that his son is gone, he tears his garment. That word is used 4 times in like one chapter. When you see words repeated that much, that's called a theme. And so when you're reading the Joseph story, what do you want to pay attention to? So in Genesis 37 to 50, every time you see clothing or garment or robe, you should probably highlight that, because the author really wants you to pay attention to that, because it happens so much. Okay? And what you do then is, when you're reading the rest of the Bible, you want to meditate and see, okay, when the author wrote this story, am I supposed to, when I see garments later in the Bible, is garment here supposed to be an allusion to the reference to the Joseph story? You're supposed to think that through. So this is a clear theme, and maybe need to think that through. Somebody speculated that the reason why in Mark's gospel, remember in Mark's gospel, at the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus is getting captured, it said that the one disciple who they didn't name ran away naked because they pulled the garment off of him. That might be an allusion to Joseph. I don't know. So just putting some things on your radar. I'm not going to go so much through the Judah Tamar story, but I want to I want to highlight a couple things. Jacob was deceived using garment. In the Judah Tamar story, how was he deceived? Because she changed her clothes. He was also deceived that way. Another pattern that emerges is a 2. When you're reading through Genesis 37 to 50, pay attention to 2 double twice. Pay attention to that. You're going to see that often, so really pay attention. Because Joseph had how many dreams? He had 2 dreams. You get the Genesis 38. How many sons of Judah died? 2. His first 2 sons died. So 2 is another little theme that bleeds through there, which is odd, because that's not one of the Bible has certain numbers that are favorites. 2 isn't one of them, except there's a large concentration of 2 in this one section of the Bible. So there you go. And so I won't go into detail about that particular story, but just some things that happened there. And so Genesis 37 and 39 connects, because they pick up at the same spot of him being sold. So now Joseph's in Potiphar's house. He's in Potiphar's house. Potiphar is the captain of the guard. And so there's an army of some sort, a guard of some sort. Maybe they're a guard to the Pharaoh, or they could be the army in general. But whatever it is, he's a high-ranking officer. And now Jacob is here. And Jacob is in this house, and he begins to work for Potiphar. And I want you to read this. We're going to read 2 things. I'm going to spoil it for you. So let's read Genesis 12 first. And then we're going to go to Genesis 39. Look at Genesis 12, verse 3. Genesis 12, verse 3 says this. I'm reading from the NRSV. This is the NASB. I have King James here, so whatever translation you're comfortable with. But it says this, I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. In you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Okay. So just have that on your mind. Now let's go to Genesis 39. And so Joseph is working for Potiphar. And it says this in verse 3 of chapter 39. His master saw that the Lord was with him. How did he know that the Lord was with him? The Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him. He made him overseer over his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in house and field. This is important. Why? Because when you see Genesis 12 and you have this idea that all the nations will be blessed in you, immediately after that, we see the Abraham story, the Isaac story, and the Jacob story. You know what all these have in common? Those are incredibly wealthy men. And so we might get this idea, the only way that I can bless the world is if I have immense wealth. Because until Joseph, everybody who blessed the world, these were wealthy men. Abraham was very wealthy. Remember, it said they had so much that him and Lot couldn't graze their animals together. Abraham was loaded. And he had a lot of servants. We have this picture of Abraham walking around in the desert. It was him, Sarah, and like Hagar. It's like 3 people walking. No, brother was a small city. Everywhere that Abraham went, he was a small city. He got attention. He was wealthy. Same thing with Isaac. Same thing with Jacob. These are excessively wealthy men. What the Joseph story shows is that you can be a part of the Genesis 12 blessing, and that doesn't require you to be a person of great wealth. What's more important than your material wealth is the fact that Joseph was a man of integrity. Because he was a man of integrity, because he did what was right, because that he did work well, and whatever work that was placed before him, he did well, everyone around him was blessed. And because of his integrity, because of his hard work, because of his diligence, Potiphar was blessed. And so now we see him being a blessing to the nations. We see Genesis 12 happening here. We see another principle happening because you know the Joseph story. You know eventually he's exalted and he becomes a person of means. But before he became a person of means, he blessed others at the station that he was at. This is where Jesus was getting this idea that if you're faithful over few, I'll make you ruler over many. This is Jesus meditating on the Joseph story, seeing that while he had nothing, he worked with diligence, he managed what was ever in his hand, and God blessed it, and others were blessed. How can you tell me, how can you tell anybody, God, I'm praying that you would make me this wealthy businessman, but your room's dirty, your car's dirty, you're late to work, you cut corners, you're not working with diligence, you're not managing what you have. Why would God make you a successful businessman if you can't do what you're doing well here? Your excellence at the station that you're in prepares you for greater excellence. Because if you are put in a position before you're ready, it will destroy you and not bless you. We must be the people that are prepared for what God has us to do. And so I think what's happening here is highlighting that. Let's look at Genesis 39. Let's press on. It says Joseph was a handsome man, and he was good looking or good to look at. If you didn't know, is what we call a callback. It's calling back to Genesis 3. What is something that was good to look at? The fruit. What else was good to look at in Genesis? What else? You can say it out loud. It's not just the fruit. What else was good to look at? It was a person. There's another person. There's two more people who were good to look at before Joseph. Close. I'm sure she might have been. I don't know. Sarah, she was good to look at, right? And who else? There's one more. Rachel, right? And this is where the Bible is so cool. You're supposed to read all these stories in light of each other. Genesis 3, so the fruit is related to the Sarah story, and is related to the Rachel story, and is related to the Joseph story. They're all connected. Because this phrase, good to look at, is rare. It doesn't happen in every chapter, right? So think about Genesis 3. What does it mean for the fruit to be good look? It was a time of testing. When something was good to look at, immediately a time of testing came. So they were tested in the garden. Genesis 12, she was good to look at. So was Abraham going to navigate this situation in Egypt according to his own definition of good and evil, or was he going to trust God? Well, he decided to scheme. And so he trusted his own good, and because of that scheming, he ended up with Hagar, and all these issues happened, right? And so instead of passing the test, he didn't pass the test. Same thing with Rachel. What was Jacob going to do with the situation? Jacob was tested with Rachel. And for somebody, how was that a test? Because you could say that Jacob did right in some ways because he worked hard and he was deceived by, I think, if I could put it like this, I think in the Rachel story, I think the focus shifts from test to more of like a deception sort of theme, where Rachel is the fruit, Laban is the snake, and Jacob is Eve. I know that's a lot to track in your mind, but it's like a pattern. You just swap out the players. So it's that kind of thing. So the same thing goes on here to Joseph. And Joseph's being tested. What is he going to do? Is he going to do what's right in his own eyes? Or is he going to do what's right before the Lord? And of course, if you read on, he says this, verse 7. Well, it tells the story a little bit. After a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Look with me. Look with me here. My master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my hand. He is not greater in this house than I am. Nor has he kept back anything from me except yourself, because you're his wife. How then could I do this wickedness and sin against God?" What's interesting is that Joseph understood that to do something like this wouldn't be just sin against his master. It'd be sin against God. And that's a revelation about the nature of our walk with God. I want you to think about in the Epistle of John. It's not the Gospel of John, the Epistle of John. It says, how can you love God and not love your brother? I would make the argument, it's like Jesus said in Matthew 22, the greatest commandment is to love God and love neighbor. The way we show, the majority of the way, not all, but the majority of the way that we show God that we love him is how we treat other people. The vast majority. If you look at most of the commands that God gives us, it deals with how we treat other people. And so loving God is inextricably connected to loving people. And so there's no difference to say that if I sin against this person, I'm sinning against God, because to love this person is to love God. And that's what makes the Israelite religion at the time so profound. Your walk with your God is directly connected with how you treat people. That's what made this religion so unique at its time. That's what made it so revolutionary. But that holds true today. We can't be who we're called to be unless we're treating each other, saved or lost, how God has called us to treat them. And so Joseph's persistent integrity came at a cost. He was lied on again and cast into the prison. And so his honesty with his brothers caused jealousy, and it put him in a pit. And now his honesty with Potiphar's wife before God put him now in the prison. The path of the righteous is not always the easy way. But if we choose the righteous way, even when it's difficult, that is a life that God can bless. And even in setback, even in hardship, he can use that. He often does use that, and we become a blessing to the nations. We become a blessing. We fulfill Genesis 12 in our lives. We're a blessing to everybody around us when we walk in that way. Okay. And so it is. He's in the prison. I'm going to speed through this part just a little bit. So it is. He's in the prison, and another set of twos come. What are there's two prisoners that are highlighted, the cupbearer and the baker, and they both have a dream. So that's two dreams, right? So you have a lot of twos. You have Joseph's two dreams, the death of those two sons, and then we have two prisoners and two dreams. More twos, lots of twos. And he interprets the dreams, right? The cupbearer has the dream about the vine, and there's 3 vines, and he crushes the grapes and make wine for the Pharaoh. And he said, hey, in 3 days you'll be restored. The baker, and this is not so good dream. He's like, I make these cakes, and then they come and eat the cakes, and and he says, well, in 3 days, things are not going to look too good for you, buddy. You're going to be killed, and then birds are going to eat your dead body. And 3 days later is the Pharaoh's birthday. And I don't know what it was about Pharaoh's birthday, but he decided this is the day the baker dies. That's a weird way to celebrate his birthday. You know what sounds like a birthday celebration? I'm going to kill this guy. Best birthday ever. Let's, the sound effect, the horns going off. Horns going off, rejoicing because that guy's dead. It was a weird birthday. Pharaoh was a strange guy. And so, needless to say, he tells the cupbearer, hey, by the way, when this happens, please don't forget me because I'm here in prison and it stinks, so you got to help me out here. And wouldn't it be the case that he forgets about him? And guess how long he forgot about him? For how long? 2 years, right? Like, twos are really coming through. 2 years. He was forgotten for 2 years. And then the Pharaoh is troubled. But before I move on to that, I want to pause real quick. In Genesis 39, while he's in the prison, look at this. 39 real quick, and I'll go back to Pharaoh. Genesis 39:21, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. That word, covenant love. He experienced the love of God in setback. We have to get rid of this idea that my life has to be perfect and blessed to experience the love of God. God's love is not connected to your natural circumstances. It's connected to the vitality of your walk with him. And he said he showed him favor, and the chief jailer committed to Joseph's care all the prisoners, and he blessed them, and he paid no heed. So it's the same thing that happened with Potiphar. It's just everywhere that Joseph went, he said, I'm going to give it my best. I don't care if I'm a trash man or a doctor. I'm going to be the best. Can I give you some advice about work? Let me give you some advice about work. It doesn't matter what job you're doing. Your goal should be, I am going to be the best. I'm going to be the best. I'm going to be the best. I don't care if everybody else hates their job. I love my job. You can hate your job. I'm going to love my job. And this is a totally off topic, has nothing to do with the sermon, but I'm going to share it anyway. There's this whole movement about people not wanting to work and his hatred for work and working 40 hours a week. And, oh, that's slavery and that's not how it's meant to be. I'm like, you're so ignorant of history, brother. You don't understand how history works. Go back to the 1700s. What were you? A farmer. And guess how long farmers worked? All day. So going from farming all day, which is what most people did, or let's say you worked as a blacksmith. Guess what? Guess how long you were a blacksmith? Until it was dark outside. Oh, there's no electricity. I guess I'm going to bed. So guess what everybody did? Work all day. This is not new. And so we have to reconceptualize how we relate to work. Work is not a punishment, and work is not, it's not poison, it's not slavery. That's stupid. That's not biblical. And this idea that the Bible says that by the sweat of your brow and work is this, and this, wrong. What was, if you're wondering what that is, it's the sound of my children crying. Okay, it's fine. What was Adam's job in the garden? He was a gardener. What did he do outside of the garden? He was still a gardener. Whether you're in the promised land or not, whether you're in Eden or not, guess what you got? Work. The difference is, are you going to work with God or are you going to work without God? That's the difference. You have to decide, am I going to allow God to shape my view of my work so that his divine meaning and purpose floods every area of my life so that even the most mundane parts of my life is full of purpose? Or am I going to choose to be miserable? It's your choice. Either way, you got to work. Just do it with God or do it without. And we have some young people in the house, so just go to school, whatever it is. You're going to go to school anyway, or you'll be a truant and go to prison. So you got to go to school. Or be a felony. You got to go to school. So if you got to go to school, and it's got to happen, do it with or without God. Take your pick. Could it be that, oh my goodness, I'm going to see God learning in history. I'm going to see God learning grammar because God structured the world. And if everything's beautiful with God, if you let it. Okay, that was off topic, but Joseph had that on lock and key. So don't be complaining about your job. Just, you can be blessed wherever you are. Man, I know, one more thing, and I'll move on. There's a guy that I know personally. He started a job. I think he was making like $14 an hour. He wasn't making a whole lot. But he said, I'm just going to do this the best that I can. And I'm just going to kill the game. I'm going to be the best at what I do. This guy didn't have a bank account at the time. This is someone I know personally. And they just stayed faithful at their job. They went from that to making $2,000 a week. Just working hard. Don't have a college degree. Didn't have any of the, just diligent at their job. This person ain't a preacher. This isn't like the special preacher favor. This is just doing your job diligently. God blesses that. Just be the best at what you do. Okay, that's not the sermon, but that'll bless somebody. Be good at what you do. All right, so let's bring it back. Bring it back to the Joseph story. And so Pharaoh, 2 years later, starts having these dreams. Maybe he's eating too much pizza and now he's having these crazy dreams. But he's having these crazy dreams. He sees a cow and things are good. 7 cows, they look healthy, good cows. And out of nowhere, these other 7 sickly cows start cannibalizing the other cows. Gruesome, really gruesome dream. And he's like, that was weird. That was a weird dream. Maybe less hanging people before bed. I'm good. And so then he goes to bed again and he has another dream. Stalk of wheat with seven grains coming out of it. He said, God, this is beautiful grain. My blessed land. Oh, Egypt, so wonderful. And then this other plant rises up that looks all destroyed with blight and it's not so healthy. And it starts eating the other plant. He said, I didn't know plants could eat other plants. What kind of dream is this? And he wakes up and he's troubled. These are weird dreams. And throughout, there was 7 cows, and then seven healthy, 7 sick cows, 7 good stalks of grain, and 7 unhealthy stalks of grain. And he's like, what could this possibly mean? Oh, my goodness, I'm so troubled. Call in the magicians. Call them in. Call them the magicians. I need somebody to interpret this. You do magic so I can figure this out. And if this sounds like a story, was it Nebuchadnezzar and his dreams, or was it one of the kings? Not Belshazzar. That's isn't that Daniel's name? Anyway, if it sounds like one of those Babylonian kings, it is. They're borrowing this. It's an inspiration. Those stories are connected. So when you go read that, think of the Joseph story. Okay, and so all these magicians are here. They're trying to figure out, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? We can't interpret this dream. And if a king gets mad enough, people start dying, and I don't want to die. And this is a sweet gig. I got government benefits. I need something to happen. And the cupbearer is like, hey, I know a guy. And the Pharaoh's like, well, if you know a guy, what took you so long to introduce him? For the plot, I had to forget. 2 years had to go by. I forgot. And so they bring in Joseph. And what happens to Joseph when he comes in? He changes his garment. Again, the garment changed, and he shaves his face. And now he's shaved. Because Egyptians, if you look at old pottery, Egyptians were clean-shaven. Jews had beards. And so the way you knew somebody was Jewish was because they had a beard. But the Pharaoh didn't like that. He said, that's messy, so you shave when you come in the presence of the Pharaoh. And so he shaved, and he came in. And he says, look, I had this dream. Can you interpret it? And Joseph, with all the chutzpah you could possibly imagine, he's like, yeah, God can interpret that dream. That's easy. Give me the dream. Tells him the dream, gives him the interpretation. We know the interpretation. The 7 years of blessing is going to come, plenty, then the 7 years of famine. And then Joseph's like, look, I'm not you. If I was, I'm not. But if I was, I would never presume. I'm not the Pharaoh. But if I was, this is what I would do. You don't have to. Just a suggestion. Oh, king, great king. But this is what I would do. I would get somebody to manage the land, take a little off the top with the plenty, so we have some with the famine, and we can take care of everything. That's just me. But what do I know? I'm a prisoner. That's what I would do. And you know what? You should appoint somebody to take care of. I don't want to step on toes, but you should appoint somebody to do that. Pharaoh's like, well, that sounds like a good idea. And you seem like a man of ideas and wisdom. Well, why not you? Well, Joseph, probably so shocked. Oh, I could never. I could, what? I wouldn't dream. Well, if you insist. Oh, you're twisting my arm, Pharaoh. I guess I'll do it. Okay, I'll do it. And so he takes off his ring, and he gives him the ring, and he parades him around. He said, there is none higher in the kingdom but me. This is the guy. Whatever he says, you do it. And he sets up the kingdom, and he is blessing Egypt. Things are going so well, right? He gets new robes, another change of clothes. Something that we don't talk about much, I think it's really interesting. He marries a priestess. And so that's a load of fun that we can save for another time. But he does marry a priest's daughter. And so, I don't know, hopefully she converted. Or he just married a pagan. I don't know. At the time of their marriage, she was for sure a pagan. Now, whether she converted later, we'll leave that to our speculations. But he was a priest of Midian, and so even if she was a pagan, I'll tell you this, God was not satisfied with them continuing in the paganism, because he made Moses and his kids get circumcised. And so even if she did, and he made the priest's daughter do it. And so he said, I don't care what your daddy taught you, this is what we do. And so, so even if Zipporah was, she wasn't then. At that point, she was properly a Jewish woman. The lesson was ingrained into her. And so, who's to say? It doesn't seem like his sons were. I'll tell you that. His sons seem like they're Jewish enough. And so, but I won't speak where the Bible is silent. And either way, he gets this wife, and guess how many kids he has? 2. Look, 2s are back again. He has 2 kids, and the 7 years of plenty are going by. Things are going great. And then, how many years into the famine does the story start to turn? 2 years into the famine. So the twos are everywhere. 2 years into the famine, Jacob and his family start to get hungry. And they say, Jacob says, look, I hear Egypt got a lot of food. And why die here? So you should go to Egypt and let's get some food. I wish I had the paper. This is some of the greatest storytelling in all of the Bible, in my opinion. My favorite. Just set aside theology. Most entertaining part of the Bible, hands down. Genesis 42 to 46. Incredible. From 42, I wish I had the paper. I forget because I circled it. From Genesis 42 to 50, so those last 8 chapters, it mentions Joseph crying is either 5 or 7 times. Joseph wept. He cried a lot. And so that insistence on that lets you know that these last chapters are supposed to be emotionally gripping. This is a very emotional story. And so what happens is his brothers come back. These are the same people that sold him into slavery, right? They come back, and Joseph notices the brothers. He notices them, but they don't recognize him because he looks like an Egyptian. And it says he starts talking to them harshly. And he's like, hey, guys, like, you gotta do something here. I don't look. Are you guys spies or what's going on? Like, why are you coming in this big group? That's weird. You're probably trying to look at our weakness, and we got to handle this. He's trying to test them. Because what happened was, it says that when his brothers saw them, and when the brothers saw Joseph, it said that they bowed down, and he realized that his dream had come to pass. So Joseph's like, okay, this meeting is a God thing. He said, now I need to see how they've transformed. Because when he had his kids, he said, God has relieved my pain, right? He gave me peace, or he took care of my suffering, right? And so it's not that Joseph wasn't impacted by what happened to him. It did impact him deeply. He said, but God has ministered to me through this new life, and everything's going to be okay. And so he says, I've moved on, but I want to see, did they move on? Did they work through this? Did they become different? Because what I won't do is bless a conniving and deceptive people. And so he sets up this whole elaborate scheme, and and so he starts to have this conversation, and he said, well, this is what I'm going to do. You told me that you're a family of 12. Family of 12. 12 sons. One son's missing. And you have a youngest brother. I don't see this youngest brother here. So you bring me this youngest brother. That'll be the proof that I know you're telling the truth and you're not spies. And meaning you, Simeon, stay here. You're being in prison. This is my collateral. Go show me. But they're talking among themselves, right? And they're discussing among themselves. And I want to read this. While they're discussing among themselves, and Simeon's in prison, right? It says this in Genesis 42 and verse 24. And he turned away from them and he wept. This wasn't easy for him to do. This was very difficult. He is overcome with emotion because he's seeing the people that betrayed him, but he's also seeing people that he loves deeply. He's happy to hear that his father is alive because he hadn't seen him in so long. And yet he's probably dealing with all kinds of emotions, more than he could possibly imagine. And so they go off. And what's interesting, too, is he's talking to them through an interpreter. And so there's this one scene where they're arguing among themselves, and it's so funny. And that's not funny, but it's just so well written. They're arguing among themselves in Hebrew, but he's pretending not to speak Hebrew. So he overhears their conversation, and they're like, this wouldn't have happened if you would have never did that to Joseph. This is why we're in this situation. And Reuben's like, you're all a bunch of idiots. Now we're suffering. God, if he would have just listened to me and never. So he hears that conversation, and he hears it in Hebrew, and he speaks Hebrew, and he runs away, and he weeps again. He weeps. He's like, oh, my goodness. It's killing him. It's killing him. He wants to reveal himself, but he has to wait. So they go off. They get some grain. They go off. They run out of food again, and they're like, hey, we got to go back. And they tell Jacob the news. Hey, Jacob, we got to go back, and we have to bring Benjamin, because if we don't, we're spies and we're dead. So either we're dead there or we dead here from not eating. Take your pick. And Jacob is like, I've lost Joseph. Simeon's in prison, and now you take Benjamin from me? Dastardly, I can't handle this. And I'll take it. And then if he doesn't come back, I will go down into the grave. And so this is another heartbreak that's happening. Takes their brother, and he sees Benjamin. He says, is this the brother that you spoke of? And when he sees Benjamin, because remember, a lot of them are half-brothers. Benjamin is Joseph's full brother. He sees Benjamin, and it says that he's overwhelmed with emotion, and he runs away, and he cries again. The Bible is over hammering this in. This is supposed to be a gut-wrenching, emotional journey. This is a roller coaster. Joseph is going through it. He's crying like my daughter. He cannot get a hold of himself. It says that he wept so much, he went in private, and he had to dress his face up so he can come back out. Like, he had the puffy eyes and everything, so he had to put the cold compress on so he could come back and deal with it. Like, he is tore up, right? It said that here, look, I want you to see it, Genesis 43 and verse 31. Then he washed his face and came out, and controlling himself, he said, right? He had to really hold it in. He's barely holding it together. And so they bring in Benjamin, and they say, all right, this is it. You're not spies. Let's have this big feast. And things are going seemingly well. He said, but I need one final test. I need to make sure that these guys are not scum. So let's have this special cup. And he tells his guards, send them away with more grain, but put the cup in the youngest son's bag. Put it in his bag, and we're going to trap him. And so they send him off. The guards chase him, finds the youngest son's bag. They say, and before that, they go dig into the bag and say, whoever has the silver, the cup, let him be a slave. He's a dirt bag anyway. We don't need that kind of brother in our family anyway. If they're going to steal after you've been so good to us, I don't care about this guy. So they're going down the line, and they get to Joseph, and everybody's stomach drops. They're like, oh, no, this can't be. And when they get to Benjamin, they said, this can't be. Everybody's freaking out. They're like, no, this can't be. They listen. And they put the argument. They said this, why would we steal? This doesn't make sense. You've been good to us. In fact, remember when you sent us away the first time and you gave us all that money? We brought the money back. It wouldn't even make sense that we stole. Like, this doesn't make sense. Joseph not having any of that. Benjamin's mind. He's a slave. And then the moment finally comes. The same Judah that sold him into slavery is now the same Judah that intercedes and sacrifices himself and say, hey, I know that the situation looks bad, but my dad really can't handle this. So how about this? Take my life. Free the boy. All of his punishment, give it to me just so my father could be saved. I can't allow it. We've lost one brother. We can't go through this again. And that was the final straw. And Joseph broke, and they all got into this big huddle, and they're weeping, and they're crying, and there's this they're snotting everywhere. And finally there's this moment of reconciliations, and the brothers are restored. Right? And I have no time. I have 5 minutes, and I'm nowhere near done. And so the rest of this sermon will be lost into the archives. But I'll say this. It's the theme. Another theme that runs through the Bible is conflict among brothers, right? Cain and Abel, Jacob and Esau, the conflict of brothers, Isaac and Ishmael. And we see Jacob and Esau, they work it out. And we see it here. These brothers were in conflict, and now there's a reconciliation among brothers. We see that theme played out here again. There's so much more that I want to say about the Joseph story, but I think there's one more thing that I need to say, and then I'll be done. And so the brothers finally reconcile. He moves his brothers into Egypt. Joseph moves Jacob and his sons into Egypt. It has a space for them in Goshen, and it says, "I will take complete care of you." God tells Jacob, I'll be with you. Go down to Egypt. Don't be afraid. I'm going to come down to Egypt with you. And so wherever God is, that's where the blessing is. It's not restricted to a land. Secular scholars would say that early parts of Genesis shows a localized God who doesn't have authority over the whole world, and it's not until the exile that they've lost their land, and so now we need a universal God. That's not true. Here in Genesis, he was God in the land of Canaan. He said, I will go with you into Egypt. He's God everywhere. This is not just happening in the exile. It's been happening throughout the entire text. So any idea that there's a change in who God is over the text is silly. He's been a universal God over the whole world, God Almighty from the beginning. That refutation was for nobody here, but I just wanted to share. But the final thing I'll share is Jacob is blessing his sons, and this is a magnificent poem that you should read. It's a really good poem. It's Genesis 49. All of it's great. I'm not going to read all of it because he has a lot of kids that he blesses. I'm going to focus on two faster than you could possibly imagine. And the reason why I'm going to focus on two is I just learned this, by the way, so I want to share this fun fact with you. You know how the birthright goes from the firstborn? So who did Jacob give? Who was the birthright was given after? I thought it was Judah the whole time. Me too. It wasn't Judah. No, it's not Reuben. I thought it was Judah this whole time, right? Because Judah did his thing and he was disqualified, and then Simeon and Levi killed all those people, so they were disqualified. I said, so surely it's Judah, right? That's what I thought. 1 Chronicles chapter 5. I'm like, I have not been reading my Bible well. I'm just missing everything. I've never read this Bible great, I guess. But look at this. 1 Chronicles 5 says this. The sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, he was the firstborn, but because he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph. I thought the birthright went to Judah. I thought that was the case because, the kings came from Judah's line, and I thought it said surely it was Judah. No, it was Joseph. Joseph got the birthright. I didn't know that. I'm like, man, I've never read my Bible properly then. And so, because of that, the chronicler is so funny that because that happened, we're not going to do Reuben's genealogy because he's not blessed. So forget Reuben. Though Judah did become prominent, and he was a ruler. My exact conclusion, the chronicler is like, yeah, you thought so, right? Yet the birthright belonged to Joseph, right? I was so stunned. I was like, I thought I read the Bible all the way through, not with good eyes. And so God made Judah prominent. He did. But he gave the birthright to Joseph. And what's interesting is as you see the Bible unfold, those two brothers, Joseph and Judah, become the focus of the rest of the story, because when the nation of Israel splits into two kingdoms, who's the prominent tribe of the northern kingdom? Ephraim. Ephraim represents the northern tribes. Ephraim represents the northern kingdom. So it really is Joseph and Judah, right? And so it all kind of came together. And so I didn't know that. I was very excited to find that out. I'm like, man, the Bible is endless fun forever. If you're not having a good time reading the Bible, that's your fault. But it's so much fun. Okay. Let's look at this. Genesis 49. I was going to read some stuff about Joseph, but I'm probably not going to have time. But I'll read Judas because this is where our Messiah comes from. So we'll focus on this. Genesis 49, starting in verse 8. It says, Judah, your brothers shall praise you. And that's a play on his name because Judah means praise. So it's a word play. And your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies, and your father's son shall bow down before you. Right? What's interesting is he's applying to Judah what was said of Joseph. Judah is lion's whelp. For the prey, my son, you have gone up. He crouches down and stretches out like a lion, like a lioness who dares to rouse him up. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet until tribute comes to him. And the obedience of the peoples is his. We see, and this is where I'm going to end. I'm going to go over like a minute or two, but I'm going to connect some thoughts. What we see here is the bridge from Genesis 3. And what I mean by that is that Genesis 3 says there's going to come a seed of the woman. There's a seed that's coming from the woman who's going to crush the head of the serpent. Pay attention to that language. The seed of the woman doesn't crush the serpent's seed head. The seed of the woman crushes the serpent's head. Seed of the woman, his heel, his is singular. So there's an individual who's a descendant of Eve who will crush the serpent's head. And we start seeing these breadcrumbs throughout all of Genesis about where this is going to be. And the way that breadcrumbs kind of play themselves out is by tracing the promised line, right? We see Abraham as the appointed one. And we see God's insistence on Isaac being the child. And what we're starting to see is, okay, this chosen seed from Genesis 3, he's going to be a descendant of Abraham. He's going to be a descendant of Isaac, right? And we see this, Isaac passes on to Jacob. And then Jacob, right, because of Chronicles, you would think, since the birthrights with Joseph, this is where it's going to come from. Jacob hits us with this crazy thing from the left and says, but this ruler is going to come from Judah. So now our expectations are set. Whoever this snake crusher is, there's going to be a snake crusher who's a son of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he's going to be the lion of the tribe of Judah, and he's going to be a king of the Judaic line. And with just Genesis, we're close. We're close to Jesus already, and we're only in Genesis. We're close to Genesis. We're close to Jesus already, and we haven't even touched the rest of the Old Testament yet. And so we're going to trace that theme as we go out, as how we're pointing to Jesus. But that's the Joseph story. I'm 3 minutes over, so I'll stop. I want to open up for questions. Any questions? We'll do comments if you'd like to share. But before we get to the comments, I do want to start with questions. Any questions, anything you want clarified? Relevant questions, right? This is not a time to ask a question about eschatology. We're not talking about that. Yes. So there are definitely many people who believe the Messiah hasn't come. Even during the time of Jesus, there were lots of people. There's a contemporary group to Jesus. They were like monks, basically, that lived in caves. They're called the Qumran people. If you read some of their documents, they're in the Dead Sea Scrolls. They weren't convinced that Jesus was the Messiah. And a lot of Jews didn't believe that he were either, because they have stories like the Maccabees. And in the Maccabees, what happens is there rises up a military ruler who liberates Israel and now lets them become a powerful kingdom. And so for a lot of people, Messiah has to be this military leader who rises up and liberates. And Jesus didn't do that in the way they thought. So there's plenty of people who they understand, right? Because even if you read Genesis 49 here, it's you're conquering your enemies and all those different things. And so a lot of this is associated with military leadership. And so there's plenty of people who their anticipation is that whatever the Messiah is like, is that he'll be one that's a militaristic leader. Now, thinking that it's a descendant of Ephraim, no, because as the story goes on, Samuel makes it very plain that it's going to be a son of David. So that's that question is eliminated by the time you get to Samuel. So if you read all the literature from the Second Temple period and contemporary to Jesus, everybody was looking for a son of David, for sure. Genealogy is like the name of the game. Um, okay, it's twofold. You need a mom to be Jewish, but your dad is how you trace your genealogy. So you need both parents to be Jewish. Your mom is what qualifies you to be a Jew, but as your dad is how you trace your genealogy. And so it's kind of weird in that way. And so, yeah, there's a lot of record keeping. Like, you can, like, because what you do is we have a lot of text that are in between the Bible, and there's a lot of genealogies there. And so there's a lot of record keeping. And the Jews they've always been like a literary people. So there's tons of records. And so it's not impossible for people to kind of trace where they've came from. And they were able to keep track of this information for quite a bit of time. So it's a combination of written and oral history. That was the whole thing with Maccabees. Maccabees was like it was in the hundreds BC. This was 900 years from David. And the complaint was the people that were ruling eventually, they weren't from the tribe of Judah, and so their rule was illegitimate. So there was it's called the Hasmonean dynasty. So Jews were an independent state for like 100 years or so, but the leader wasn't from the house of David, and that caused all sorts of problems. Like with Herod, the Jews didn't receive Herod. He was Idumean, and so his bloodline was questionable. It was a lot of issues. And so, like, even to the time of Jesus, if you were trying to lead and you weren't of the house of David, that caused a lot of problems. So they took that very serious, because the leader has to be, because it says your sons will rule the throne forever. So you have to be a son of David. So they do really good genealogy work. Any other questions? Yes. Yes. And I'll say this. Jacob is notorious for, man, a couple months ago I did a teaching on Jacob. Jacob's kind of a scumbag. If you go back and read his story, he's scummy. He's not a great guy. He's a really kind of a terrible person. Like there's a lot of bad people in the Bible. He's like particularly bad. Jacob's rough. I mean, he's really rough. And that favoritism wasn't just with his sons, it was with his wives too. And so I'm sure they had those same concerns. And I think that perspective is very helpful. And I think it helps fill out the motives of the brothers. I think it elevates it more than the just petty jealousy. It was more so like, I need to make sure that my family is secure, and my father's favoritism is going to prevent that. But I think Jacob did run his house poorly. I think he did. But that's not uncommon. There's a lot of bad fathers in the Bible. And that is a theme in and of itself. Like Abraham wasn't the best dad in a lot of ways. David was a terrible father. David was a terrible father. Oh, there's a lot of. I mean, it just is what it is. It's in the Bible. The Bible says that he never disciplined Adonijah. Never disciplined him. Well, that's why he did what he did. There's a lot of bad dads in the Bible, and the Bible doesn't shy away from that because it wants us to see when you don't govern your house well. Like, this is the impact. So, moral of the story: never show favorites. There's no such thing as a favorite kid. You love all your kids equally. Just don't play favorites. People ask me, do I have favorites in church? No, I love you all equally. I don't have any favorites. See, if he would have just had one wife, then there would have to be no needs for favorites. And there we go. Just have one wife. That's a solution. There you go. Be monogamous. There we go. Easy. But no, I think that definitely fills out the portrait. That was very helpful. Thank you. I think that helps them not be such flat characters, I think. Yes. Any other questions? Okay. Any comments people want to make? Anything they want to comment that's on topic? That's fine. We don't need it. I just want to offer that space. Okay? Yes. Okay. Please. So I'll say this. I think where is it? I think to me one of the most prevalent ones of ideas. Where is it in my notes? It's Genesis 45, because this is the theme that the prophets pick up on more than anything. Here we go. I'm going to read this one. Here we go. So Genesis 45, verse 7. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth to keep you alive, to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. And the concept of the remnant, I think, is a massive theme in the prophetic literature. And I think, so as far as the idea of reconciliation, I think there's multiple things that stand out. I think as far as like the prosperity of Joseph, that is a theme, as far as that it's connected to Genesis 12 as something a blessing to the world, right? Not just his prosperity for the sake of prosperity. So it's in connection to Genesis 12. And as far as the reconciliation of brothers, that's, to me, it's that's language that gets picked up in the prophets too, right? And so the conflict of brothers and them being brought back together, that's a theme throughout Genesis. I think that would be one theme. And also the preserving of the remnant. I think all of these are just multiple themes that are coming together. So I don't know if there's one major, I don't think there's one singular thing that we're supposed to take away, but I think that the biblical authors use all of these in prophetic literature, and I think it's kind of all they use all of these in their tool bag to communicate about what's happening in the future. But, I mean, Middle Easterners probably would have that conclusion. It's just they have their lens that they're concerned with. Now, the question is does that perspective always align with what the biblical author is concerned about? And then that's a separate question. But I have so many people looking at the clock and the time. I'm going to stop because people are getting antsy. So thank you, everybody, for showing up. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully the Joseph story was interesting. Next week, we're going to pick up with Exodus. And like I said, we're doing Genesis through Kings. That way we get the basic stories. We're going to pick up with Exodus. And I'd like to take us into the wilderness. I want to start with Exodus and end with us in the wilderness. So once we're through the Red Sea, that's where I'd like to stop next week. So thank you all for joining. God bless you. You're dismissed. And the time is 8:14. We'll start prayer at 8:19.